good that this project is finally officially started. We've been talking about it, and now the contract between Mark Morrison and the City of New York and the Parks Department has finally been registered by the comptroller, so it's a real live job now. Over the past few months, there's been a lot of discussion about what this contract means and what is and what is not included. So I think before we even talk about the site, I just want to give a brief summary of the contract. This contract gives Mark Morrison two core tasks. Task one, as Commissioner Lewandowski referred to, is to take a look at the perimeter around the basins and see what it would take to make it safe for a person to jog around it and for a disabled person to get to it. This means replacing the lighting, replacing the fencing, replacing the asphalt, cutting back the overgrowth, and providing some ADA access points in two locations, probably at the driveway by the Jackie Robinson entry and across the street from Vermont Avenue, across the parking house there. For this first task, the mayor has provided $7.67 million, which is a pretty substantial sum, to be used for construction only in this first task. At this point, we're not exactly sure how far that will go, but it's based on our own internal estimates, and we're pretty sure we can do all the work I just described. If we're lucky and we don't run into some costs that we don't anticipate, what we'd really like to do is open up one of the paths that goes across the reservoir, one of the basin paths. Anybody who's walked across one of these paths really knows what an incredible experience this would be. I'm thinking about the path between Basin 3 and 2, but we'll take a look and see which one is most able to be reconstructed. Now, Mark's specific task with the perimeter work is to investigate what it will take to meet the program that I described. He's going to do detailed estimates, and he's going to produce a design and construction drawings that we can issue for bidding. We'll first take the proposed scheme to the relevant community boards, Community Boards 5 and 5 in Brooklyn and Queens. But I think we can all agree that this is work that should move forward, and we're really going to push it hard. Now, task 2. Task 2 is a more delicate mission, and it's on a different timeline. Mark is to develop 3 conceptual master plans that address the interior of the reservoirs. The master plans are to be distinct from one another and to be generated from input by all of the stakeholders. Can you hear me back there? Okay. How about now? Can we turn this down a little bit? Hello? Okay, I'll just hold it away from my mouth and see what happens. Task 2, as I described, is a more delicate mission, and it's on a different timeline. Mark is to develop 3 conceptual master plans that address the interior of the reservoir. We're good now? All right. The master plans are to be distinct from one another and are to be generated by input from all of the stakeholders. There's no set program at this point for him to work with, except that one of these conceptual master plans must be entirely passive in nature. The other 2 conceptual master plans are wide open. Now, this meeting we're having tonight is to inform you of what we've gathered so far and to kickstart another round of listening in order to get to 3 programs for development into 3 distinct conceptual master plans. Now, let me be clear before I introduce the project manager for the project. Mark's office is not tasked with producing any construction documents for anything interior to the reservoir, except perhaps that path going across that already exists. He's to produce 3 conceptual master plans only, and to develop them any further into bid documents would require another work order, which would require another registration by the comptroller. Good. So now, I'm sure there's questions about this, but let me ask you to hold them to the end so that we can be sure to get through the entire presentation. We have this room, as Commissioner Lewandowski said, until 9 p.m., and I'll stay here until that time to answer the questions. But for now, let me just introduce Katie Raisdorf, who's over there. She's going to be the Parks Project Manager. She'll be overseeing Eric Mattis, who's over here, who is the project manager for for Mark Morrison and Associates, and he will be taking over now to give you a rundown of the existing conditions of the park, the outreach that we've done so far and the results of that outreach, and basically to give you an overview of where we are now. So, Eric, why don't you take over?
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, so basically what Kevin said, I'm going to give you a brief history history. A lot of you probably know a lot about the history already of the Ridgewood Reservoir and Highland Park in general. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about existing site conditions and some preliminary work that we did looking at the demographics of the two community boards. And then I'm going to basically hand over the presentation to Chris Surrett in our office, which is really going to talk about, he's going to talk about the site ecology, flora and fauna. And then Chris is going to hand over the presentation to Melissa Ix, who's standing right over there. And she's basically going to talk to the subject of the past community meetings that were held earlier during this process when the project was first started about, 2 years ago. So you can advance the slide, Chris.
What meetings are those?
I'm talking about the original community meetings that were conducted about 2 years ago. Correct. The listening sessions, I'm sorry. So talking a little bit about the historical timeline, looking at the timeline from 1800 to about 1900, the Ridgewood Reservoir was desperately needed because of the burgeoning population of Brooklyn. So they needed to get the water for all those people. So in 1852, private companies like the Nassau Water Company began to purchase land in Queens, and essentially that land was turned into the Ridgewood Reservoir. So you can see in this top photo right over here, or actually it's a rendering or a depiction taken up from a bluff. You can see the first two basins, basins 1 and 2, were originally constructed. Basin 3 was constructed a few years later because the amount of water needed to be increased so much due to the demand for the water. So basically, Nassau Water the city of Brooklyn bought out Nassau Water in 1857, and then the Ridgewood Reservoir, the first two basins, were built in 1858. So you can see in this photo right over here is the construction of the reservoir in 1858. Next thing that started to happen is the city of Brooklyn purchased the land surrounding the Ridgewood Reservoir, essentially to create a larger park, which naturally became Lower and Upper Highland Park. So you can see in that lower right-hand corner one of the promenades within Highland Park in that time period. So you can advance, Chris. Now looking from the dates of around 1900 and bringing us up to present times, the formation of the greater New York City basically brought about water in from the Catskills. So it relinquished the idea that Brooklyn had to have its own water supply system. So it was